Welcome to Infinite Novel. Dive into epic alternate realities. All rights to original creators.
Chapter 86, Ch 86, Noble Sacrifice. After nailing Jiraiya to the back of his head with the apple, Ren quickly entered the changing room, where he dressed back up and left the hot springs, not at all interested in talking with the Sunin. Jiraiya was one of the few people skilled enough in sealing to notice the hidden seals all over Ren's body. There was no way Ren would be taking a bath anywhere near him, if only to avoid uncomfortable questions. Ren wasn't inclined to share his seals with Jiraiya or anybody, really. It was why he had his clone spend 3 months transcribing some of his more important seals into English script. Contrary to popular belief, the Japanese writing system was not all that important for seals. The people in this world simply spoke and wrote in Japanese, so that's what was used for seals. It was that simple. Of course, making a whole new sealing language based on the English alphabet was not exactly easy. Ren was not done with that. Not by a long shot. Such a thing was the work of a lifetime. To the natives, it would probably seem as if he was developing a completely new language for his sealing. That's why Ren only managed to get his important seals working on the English script. He didn't bother translating the regular explosive seals he used with Kunao, nor did he bother updating the gravity seals just yet. Trying to transcribe that seal while it was active, Ren was already getting a headache just thinking about it. He had no idea how he could do it safely. He was probably going to just let it be as it is and only make the new addition in the English script to ensure the whole picture would not make any sense to anybody trying to crack it. In hindsight, he should have thought of making an English script for sealing long ago, but it only came up when Hiruzen Sarutobi asked Ren if his new time-stop seals could be, used by people other than Ren. Alas, Ren didn't make his seals to keep them hidden but to use them. They were never supposed to be some sort of hidden triumph card. So, he readily used them on missions, going as far as swiftly finishing several capture missions in the past few months. It was only a question of time until the Hokage was notified that Ren's prisoners were being dragged to the village in the time-stop fields. Well, they had no idea what it was, just that it was very effective. It took Hiruzen taking a look at it in his face when he realized what Ren had done. It was simply hilarious. He looked exasperatedly excited, with a massive touch of disbelief as his jaw was almost on the floor. Sadly, then the greed entered his eyes and ruined the hilarity of the moment. But Ren was prepared for the interest his seals would garner. Ren understood why the man wanted them. If Konoha ninjas could use the time-stop seal tags, it would redefine large-scale ninja warfare, and it would also make capture missions a whole lot easier. They made non-lethally subduing an enemy a trivial thing. Heh. With the fakest polite smile, Ren told the Hokage that such a thing was not possible, and he wasn't even lying because he put in the extra effort during their creation process to ensure the seals were unstable enough to go off a few seconds after their inscription. Creating a safe version that could be used as an exploding tag was most likely possible, not that Ren admitted that to Hiruzen, but it would take time and research. Time and research he was unwilling to do. His reason was quite simple, too. There is a reason why nations in his previous life did not sell nukes to other countries. The principle was the same. If Ren commercialized his new seals and started selling them to the village and its ninjas, then he would sooner or later find himself attacked with them. It didn't matter if it would be Danzo because that man would definitely get his grubby hands on the seals one way or the other if Ren started selling them, or if it would be the other village's ninjas because their spies in Konoha would doubtlessly manage to swipe a few of his seals in such a situation. Ren decided he didn't particularly like the vision of having time-stopping or salt alteration explosive seals thrown at him. Not at all. Cheating was something only he should be able to do. Therefore, not even Ino and Hinata would be getting any tags with them. At least, not anytime soon. There was naturally some grumbling. Hiruzen was not happy. Some people even quietly called Ren a traitor for not providing his seals to the village, but well, as long as they didn't see and understand the design of his seals, nobody could really know how they worked, so even if Ren told them his seals are powered by pigs that could fly, they could only believe him. Thus, English script. Because fuck them. Even if Jiraiya had somehow gotten as smart as Shikamaru, he wouldn't be cracking Ren's seals anytime soon. Even the smartest person would need at least a small hint or frame of reference to decode a completely new, wholly unknown language, and Ren was not going to give them that. But for now, his gravity seals were still in the Japanese script, so they might be vulnerable to Jiraiya's wandering eyes. Oh, Ren doubted the man could actually replicate or understand how the seal worked without spending several weeks or maybe even months studying the design, but at the very least, Jiraiya might be able to tell its general purpose with a casual glance. And he would then ask questions, if only out of curiosity as a Sealmaster discovering something new. Not in the mood to have such a conversation with the man, Ren wryly smiled as he started charging the transportation seal to teleport to a marker seal on the borders of the land of fire and the land of hot water when he sensed Jiraiya enter the changing room and the bathhouse in a hurry and most intending to chase him. Fortunately, Ren thought of that possibility, so he placed a little something that would be dispersed after one-time use on the floor in the middle of the door leading out of the changing room. The door that was directly opposite the door to the female changing rooms. As Jiraiya, only half-clothed, hurried to exit the changing room, he suddenly found himself forcefully ejected forward, and with a wide-eyed look full of surprise, he flew straight through the door of the female changing room. His unintended flight had enough momentum to make him whiz through the entire changing room and fly through the cloth leading to the female side of the hot springs, where he finally landed and skidded on the floor until he ended up on the edge of the pool, his ding-dong free from its bounds. Ow! Jiraiya said with an owlishly slow blink as he raised his head and looked around, only for a lecherous smile to appear on his face as he noticed the dozens of completely naked women in the hot springs looking at him in shock. Several of them were so bewildered that they even forgot to cover themselves and their tits were on full display. Nice. Jiraiya gave them a shaky thumbs up with a grin, the existence of some loser who managed to nail him with an apple fully forgotten at this point. The women looked with wide eyes down, noticing Jiraiya Jr., who was proudly standing at attention, saluting them as hard as it could. Then, the loud shrieking began, and Jiraiya was reintroduced to the righteous female fury. Ren made the seal extra forceful because he knew Jiraiya could handle it. He was a big, strong man. A big, strong man who was currently in his personal paradise, being stomped on by a horde of angry and indignant females who just had a peeping sun and delivered straight to their bathing area. Ren snickered to himself as he watched Jiraiya's beating through the visual aspect of his improved detection seal, and he had to say, several of the chicks in there were 9 or even 10 out of 10. Very nice, indeed. He especially liked the slender blonde woman who relished repeatedly abusing Jiraiya Jr. with her foot. His sacrifice was definitely noble. Even Ren had to admit that Jiraiya's loss of future possibility for progeny was worth the amazing view. With his daily good deed done, Ren finished charging the transportation seal and disappeared from the town as the connection with the visual aspect of his detection seal suddenly cut off due to the distance. Unfortunately, he had only one marker seal in the land of hot water, and it was in the previous town. So, Ren decided to just bite the bullet and teleport back to the land of fire, to the nearest marker seal to the border. He decided he might as well just go through the border patrol station to have proper documentation about his border crossing since he was back in his country. Most ninjas did not bother with it, but there were certainly upsides to be in the country of his mission legally. In a much better mood, Ren let out one last chuckle and started leisurely walking toward the border, already planning to spread more marker seals all over the land of hot water. But after a few minutes of walking, Ren frowned. He couldn't get the picture of the naked blonde woman out of his mind. She was hot, and he was now horny. Biting his lower lip, he let out a frustrated groan. Fucking Jiraiya. Ren inwardly grumbled. This was his fault. One of these days, I am going to make an Ika burning seal. He huffed. But his lust didn't abate, and with a long sigh, Ren looked at the pocket watch he had stored in his storage seal. Nodding, he created a shadow clone who would continue on its journey to the land of hot water while he teleported back to his apartment at Konoha. It was afternoon, a bit after the Ninja Academy ended. Exactly the time when Ino usually came to Ren's apartment for, well, she had many excuses, but that didn't matter. The second Ren arrived back home, Ino was indeed there, lounging on the couch while reading. Ren's left eye twitched minutely when he saw the Ika cover of the book. "Er? Ren." Noticing him, Ino furrowed her eyebrows and stood up from the couch as Ren approached her. "What are you doing he?" She squealed when Ren, out of nowhere, picked her up and put her on his shoulder and slapped her behind. "Ino." Ren hummed, squeezing Ino's butt cheek in exactly the way he knew she loved. "I am horny. Wanna recreate some scenes from Ika? Oh." For a moment, Ino stayed silent, her mind still processing the unexpected happenings, but when she finally realized what was going on, she squealed again, this time in delight as she kicked her feet up and down, making it quite challenging for Ren to keep holding her on his shoulder. The blonde girl excitedly ordered as she twisted her body in a manner that would make Ren's spine break if he attempted to imitate it. She somehow ended up in his hands in Princess Carrie, but before he could question it, Ino put her arms around his neck and pecked his lips. "Yes. Onwards, to the bedroom. I missed you so much. You have seen me in the morning," Ren helplessly pointed out, quite enjoying the short kisses Ino was delivering on his jaw. Hearing him, she stopped for a moment and gave him a Vulpan grin. "Exactly." Chuckling, Ren captured her lips as he entered the bedroom. Chapter 87, ch 87. Not at all pretty after enjoying the rest of the day and evening with Ino and the huffy Hinata, who caught them in flagrante when she came to his apartment in the early evening and Ren had to give her a lot of loving attention to stop her pouting. Ren teleported back to his shadow clone who by then passed the border and was once more in the land of hot water. He spent the following 2 days touring the big cities of the country, widely regarded as the best holiday destination in the world. They had it all. Good restaurants, amazing hot springs, great hotels and service industry. The only thing Ren did not visit were the brothels. He was happily in a relationship, after all. But in one hotel lobby, he overheard a merchant sing praises about how this country had the best prostitutes far and wide. Then again, the red light districts in Konoha and the capital of the Land of Fire had similar reputations. Considering that working in a brothel was regarded as an easy job with less risk for better pay by many experienced kunoichi from the intelligence department when they entered their 30s and therefore got too old for their usual honey trapsticks so they were allowed to retire, Ren believed the claim of Konoha's red light district to be the best more. In his previous life, Ren wondered how Jiraiya got anything done with his intelligence network when he spent most of his time in brothels. But after living in this world and getting a bit of insight on how these things worked, Ren's eyes were open to the truth. And because of that, he got shivers whenever he was just passing by a brothel. There was no way he would ever enter any such establishment. He simply wasn't brave enough. Most people usually did not care about the uncomfortable reality. They did not think about it. But Ren didn't close his eyes in front of it. He couldn't. He peered into the abyss because of his curiosity, and now he could never unsee it. He once might or might not have peeked at unimportant mission reports from the intelligence department in the village. He now had a very real inkling of just how many accidents happened during post-coital bliss in brothels, especially when the hidden villages had the prostitution industry of their countries mostly firmly in their grasp through their undercover kunoichi honey trap/assassins/info gatherers, who were spread all over the country and sometimes even beyond. These women were not strong. As kunoichi, they wouldn't be able to hold their own against a kunao fodder from the genin corps. On the battlefield, they would not even amount to be a speed bump for regular genins, but they still slit more throats per capita for their village than all the genin corps ninjas combined. All done in the bedroom while their victim was coming his lower brains into them. Ninja life was not at all only about fighting and big flashy jutsu like the anime portrayed it. Some of its aspects were just not pretty. It seemed almost stupid to let the fangirl culture fester in the academy. But here is the thing. It was basically a different take on a subtle seduction and anti-seduction training for dummy ninja wannabe kiddies. Ren never thought that 8-year-old girls getting interested in boys and starting to crush on them to the point of turning into rabid fangirls was natural. And sure enough, it wasn't. In his previous life, he suspected the influence of chakra, and while that wasn't a completely wrong assumption because the kids grew up and entered puberty faster than in his previous life, it wasn't all there was to it. What Ren didn't take into account in his past life was human nature and deviousness. The whole fangirl thing? It was subtly induced by the teachers in the kunoichi classes. The most aggravating thing was that it worked out well for the village. In many, many ways. It was ridiculous how beneficial the fangirl culture was when the big picture was considered. The girls chased after their crush and tried to seduce the poor lad while competing with each other. That put them under pressure and made them more creative in their attempts. They either learned to seduce real well for a kid, or they decided to train a whole lot to become stronger to impress their crush. One of the two was going to happen in the years it took for most fangirls to graduate from the academy. Even those rare girls who didn't fall into this norm usually found some other talent they had or trained some skill that would be useful later down the line in their ninja life. All to impress their crush. Their teachers did not even need to motivate them much. Peer pressure did most of the work. And the poor lad who found himself as the target of the fangirl's affections? He was usually from a clan. Somebody who had a lot of talent and promise as a ninja. That was by design. Because it was that kind of guy who would need anti-seduction training the most in his future. Once the guy grew up and made a name for himself, seduction attempts and honey traps would come. It was the most basic tactic in the book. And it was not used only by the enemy villages but also by the allied kunoichi who were more into the whole gold-digging aspect of life. Ren would know. Ever since he made a name for himself in the past few months, Hinata and Ino mastered the glare the competition away no jutsu because of how many random headband-wearing girls accidentally tried to bump into him on the streets, or grope a feel, or lean forward to give his eyes just the right angle at their suspiciously large cleavage. Ren honestly understood why Guy and Kakashi behaved like weapons of mass anti-female attention. It probably wasn't the only benefit, but their behavior most likely put off 90% of women who would otherwise try their luck with them. Even Suzuki lost most of his fangirls when he became the Sajigai, and Ren knew the kid just loved it. Ren suspected that Suzuki more or less imitated Guy exactly because of that. At least partially. The idea behind the fangirl culture was that the more bad flirting and harmless seduction attempts by the female classmates a talented boy experienced, the more resistant he would become to it later down the line. And if it somehow failed successfully and the boy would fall for one of his fangirls, then all the better for the village. Skilled ninjas were usually like Kakashi or Guy. They have seen too much and had too many screws loose. They did not do relationships. Many avoided sex altogether for the most part, dying before they could even have kids. So, softly giving the 8-year-old girls an idea to be persistent in trying to seduce strong and talented ninjas suited Konoha well. It both ensured that at least some mentally screwed up but skilled ninjas would have progeny and a good reason to not take the easy way out of the mortal coil once their profession becomes too much for them to bear. Hell, it sounded like such a stupid bullshit to Ren. His modern mindset was still offended whenever he was reminded of the situation. And he almost choked because the retarded system fucking somehow worked. The numbers did not lie. Ever since it was created by Hiruzen Sarutobi, by the way. Because, of course, the esteemed Hokage had a hand in it, the suicide numbers had gone down, and the ninja kids' numbers outside the clans had gone up. Funnily enough, it was one of the reasons why Konoha could afford to throw so many fresh bodies into the meat grinder every war. Every village that knew of how the female academy students behaved in Konoha looked down on the village for it. But the joke was on them. Not to mention, most of the girls from the academy would not go the combat ninja route anyway. They would never become powerful. Never amount to an impactful force on their own. Most of them would become intelligence gatherers, spies, and saboteurs, the ninja stuff that was more suited to a more feminine touch and did not require beyond civilian strength. This way, the girls got a head start in seduction training since most of them ended up being useless for anything but the honey trap route. There was no such thing as dropping out of the ninja academy after graduating. Graduating meant they entered the village's military forces. They enlisted. And that was that. There was no easy way out after that. And if the only thing they could be used for was to spread their legs for the village, then that's what they would be trained in even if they didn't particularly like it. That was the brutal truth. Of course, Ren was making it sound far more grave than it actually was. Many girls find special talents of their own and are scouted by various divisions in Konoha's forces. Like that girl, Shiho, from Cryptoanalysis. It was not as if all non-combat oriented kunoichi had no choice but to spread their legs for the village by default. Plus, the seduction specialists were paid very well. It is usually either the path of seduction specialist or the genin core for the leftover girls and boys. For some reason, the females in that situation especially do not choose the genin core after hearing about the substantial pay difference. Konoha did not need to force them into that kind of lifestyle. Not after they are sat in front of the available choices to them and one financially outweighs the other. Not after the kunoichi class's general desensitization. On the outside, they learned pressing flowers, some womanly crafts and were given some lectures. It sounded like a waste of time for future kunoichi, but over the years that shit had as much effect as the fabled will of fire. It was insidious as heck. Ren could see it on Ino and Hinata. Nakedness did not make them stop. During their first time, they did not feel as much shame as virgins should. They were mostly curious. And some of the positions they wanted to try, well, it painted a picture to Ren about the lectures the girls were getting in their kunoichi classes. He felt exasperated because, on one hand, he approved of his girl's boldness. He expected Hinata to be a stuttering mess, but instead, she was a wild and curious whirlwind. On the other hand, he realized the underlying purpose of that class. Well, he was not the Hokage, so he couldn't change it, so he didn't dwell on it. It was what it was. And even those talented girls suited for more important, combat-oriented, medical, or other roles lost nothing by getting some seduction training either. They were kunoichi, too, and while the chance of them being sent on a honey trap mission was pretty much nil, one never knew when such a skill might prove useful. If not in their kunoichi life, then in their personal one. Of course, the seduction attempts by fangirls were pretty basic. Resisting them was nothing spectacular. But the kiddies in the academy were just that, kids. It was a start for gaining a very necessary skill. So, Jiraiya had quite a nice and cushy gig going on for him. He toured the brothels that secretly belonged to Konoha. There, he flirted, drank, and had fun talking and getting praised by the girls until he randomly picked one and went to the private room with her. Of course, the man knew exactly who from the working girls was an undercover Konoha kunoichi. There was nothing random about his pick. And in the private room, Jiraiya gets to enjoy fucking the girl while she reports her findings to him. That's what many of the reports Ren sneaked a peek at stated. Not in these words. Not this bluntly. But he understood what the reports tried to convey. His opinion of Jiraiya dropped a bit after that, but he quickly realized that this was not an anime. This was a real world with real people. Jiraiya wasn't celibate. He was not some one-dimensional super pervert who was secretly a virgin and kept it that way because he still hoped that one day he could jump Tsunade's bones. Well, he did want to do that, and he prided himself on being a super pervert. But he lived his life in a more NSFW way. Then, he wrote books based on his experiences and earned millions. Honestly, Ren admired the pervert a bit for that. He had to give it to him. He had his life sorted out. Other ninjas risk their lives for their village on a weekly basis. Jiraiya, however, gets his Jiraiya Jr. wet on a regular basis for the village. It doesn't take a genius to see which of the two was the better deal. Shaking his head, Ren quietly chuckled to himself as he arrived near the entrance to the supposedly abandoned ancient underground village carved into the cave where he was supposed to deliver the documents to the client. His eyebrows furrowed as he saw the entrance to the massive cave, easily as big and wide as the Hokage Tower. He didn't feel very good about going in there. Something about this felt a bit fishy. Here he was. A dark cave in front of him, and he was supposed to go in. What could go wrong, right? It felt like some shitty trope from a third-rate horror movie whose author was too lazy to even half-ass it. But no matter how much Ren looked around, the surroundings seemed clear. Even his detection seal did not alert him to any hidden presence. So, with a deep breath, Ren started walking inside, hoping the client would get there fast so he could go home. Chapter 88, CH 88. Just another C-rank mission. How the hell did I get into this stupid situation again on a freaking C-rank mission where I shouldn't meet even a simple genin? This is ridiculous. Ren idly thought with a bead of sweat rolling down his temple as he suddenly glanced around, his back to the entrance of the cave while on all other sides he was surrounded by what felt like jonins, going by their chakra signatures. As he was about to enter the cave, he had this bad feeling. It just looked way too fishy. So, at the very last second, he decided to send a shadow clone in his stead with the requested documents while he waited it out outside. It was disrespectful to the client, but this was supposed to be just a simple C-rank mission, so Ren didn't care about the client getting insulted if he found out. If he wanted proper respect, he should have paid more money and requested a higher-ranked mission. Turns out, waiting outside was a good call in the end. Because if Ren was in the cave right now, experiencing the same situation, he would have been in a much worse spot. At least, out in the open, if a fight broke out, he could go all out without caring about bringing the cave down on his head. Now that he thought about it, he was primarily known for using explosives. Ugh, this shit was totally planned, wasn't it? Because really, what are the chances? Ren counted the jonins around him. There were 10 of them visible, and his detection seal was not showing any hidden ones. Well, he tentatively believed his seal, but he decided to be careful about sudden ambushes from blind spots anyway. His shadow clone in the cave took a position near the entrance but still stayed out of sight, just in case they had some friends hidden inside, too. At the very least, it could provide an early warning. A second passed, and Ren's eyes landed on one jonin who slowly walked forward, lazily approaching him with a disarming smile that seemed a bit forced on his face. The Jonin had his hands up in a show that he didn't wish for hostilities, and Ren's eyebrows furrowed as he inwardly did a double take. He recognized the man. The headband was a dead giveaway that he was from Kumo, as were his friends, but what was the disciple of the late Third Reikage doing here? The bad feeling in Ren's stomach intensified, and any hope that this was just a simple misunderstanding died a pitiful, quick death. Maybe if he never watched Naruto, he might have his hopes still up. Darui was not very widely known in this world, but Ren did remember his existence from the anime. Kumo kept him quite hush-hush and didn't flaunt his skill as Konoha flaunted Kakashi's, but this guy was A's right-hand man and, therefore, should not be picking up files from a simple C-rank mission. Even if, by some unholy coincidence, Konoha was opening secret diplomatic talks with Kumo, they would have sent at least a team of Jonin for it. Not a Chunin like Ren. Hello, I believe you have something for us. Darui spoke and slowly put his hands down when he noticed that Ren didn't instantly get into a fighting stance. Hearing him, Ren inwardly frowned. His gaze slowly moved over the 10 ninjas in front of him, making the atmosphere awkward as the silence stretched. Only a minute later did he slowly nod. The mission scroll, he asked Darui, mostly to get a proof that he was truly the client. Well, or that he killed him and looted the scroll. But there was no way of knowing which of these it was for Ren. Ah, yes. Here. Darui perked up and took a step forward, only for Ren to instantly become guarded. Recognizing that, Darui stopped in his tracks, realizing that getting closer could provoke Ren. They silently stared at each other until Darui scratched his cheek and, with an awkward laugh, he took a step back before tossing the scroll to Ren, who easily caught and opened it. The scroll checked out. Then again, of course, it did. Somebody like Darui was not as harmless and inexperienced as he tried to portray himself to be with his awkward acting. If they were here for Ren and this was indeed a trap, they would not make such a rudimentary mistake as faking the mission scroll. Back in the cave, Ren's clone created another clone who started to craft seals, just in case this turned ugly. Then, the initial clone walked out of the darkness of the cave with the documents and headed toward Darui, handing them over to the man who watched him with amusement written on his face. You aren't very trusting, are ya? He chuckled as he received the documents, slightly shaking his head in exasperation. But if he expected an answer, he was left disappointed when Ren just silently nodded as he sealed the mission scroll into his storage seal. It wouldn't do to lose it and later on find out he has no way to prove that handing out these documents was truly a mission he received from Konoha rather than him turning a traitor. Just in case the documents were stolen, Ren wouldn't put such a ploy past some of his more influential enemies in Konoha. At this point, he had no idea what was going on, so he decided to take every precaution. How dull. Darui rolled his eyes at Ren's non-answer, a bit of frustration seeping into his tone because Ren refused to play ball and get roped into a proper conversation. Ren was, however, too preoccupied with his mind going a mile a minute. He was starting to see some implications of his situation, and he wasn't liking them. There were only two reasons why Kumo Jonins in these numbers would gather like this. Either they had a very important mission nearby, possible. But in that case, there would be no need to show up in front of Ren in full force. In fact, it would have been a massive mistake to do so. No. Ren decided they did not have an important mission nearby, which was way worse for him because it meant that he was their mission. Jonins are the main fighting force of a ninja village. Situations where there are more than 4 Jonins teamed up for something were extremely rare outside of war. Even S-rank missions were usually done by teams of 4 at most. And yet, Ren had 10 of them in front of him, led by the Reikage's right-hand man. But, that would mean somebody in Konoha sold him out. Of course, Danzo was the first suspect that came to Ren's mind almost instantly. But would Danzo really employ Kumo to deal with him? It frustrated Ren that he didn't know the answer to that. Then again, there were all these grumpy old men who disliked that Ren didn't share his seals with them. Danzo was not Ren's only enemy in Konoha, just his most obvious one. For all he knew, it might actually have been Kumo's spy who ensured Ren would get the mission, and nobody in Konoha sold him out. Ugh. The more he thought about it, the less obvious the answer became. Seeing that Darui was starting to look impatient, Ren looked him in the eyes and dryly said, "These documents are not why you are here, are they?" "Afraid not. Sorry." Darui sheepishly shrugged his shoulders and gave Ren a real apologetic look as he rubbed the back of his head with his left hand. But not for a second did the man relax his guard. Ren noted that his right hand was ready to draw his sword at a moment's notice. "Why am I not surprised?" Ren grumpily muttered under his nose, but he was not quiet enough because Darui clearly heard him and chuckled. "This is honestly awkward. It's usually not me who does the recruiting he is doing something with chakra." A brown-haired woman suddenly spoke from behind Darui, who slowly blinked as Ren stiffened. A freaking chakra sensor? They were very prepared for him. All his seals were based on chakra, and that meant the sensor would feel their location. That made using seal traps way harder. The only upside of the situation was that the chakra sensor did not feel the seals crafted by Ren's clone in the cave, otherwise, she would have been warning her teammates about them by now. Her range probably wasn't that big, or she wasn't focusing on the cave. Thank the sage for small mercies. Both Ren and Darui involuntarily uttered at the same time before the hell broke loose, and Darui's companions instantly burst into action. Ren had to interrupt the charging of his transportation seal and jumped out of the way just a moment before several kunai whizzed past where he had stood a second ago. All would have been non-lethal hits, so they wanted him alive. That was good. He could use that. As Ren's toes landed on the ground, he used chakra to spring himself back nearly instantly, narrowly avoiding some sort of taser-like lightning technique. Somersaulting in the air over a few shuriken, Ren landed on the palms of his hands and let himself fall into a roll on the ground, dodging a sword strike aimed to disable him from the fastest of his assailants. After the roll, Ren jumped back once more, his feet landing horizontally on the rock cliff above the cave's entrance as he let the momentum make him slide back after the landing, which allowed him to evade a water bullet that crashed into the rock and cracked it. With narrowed eyes, Ren looked toward his enemies, two kunao popping into his hands as he felt the pressure of being attacked by 10 jonin. He was about done with putting seals on the kunao and barely a second from throwing them to return the offensive when a loud boom resounded through the surroundings, causing everybody to duck, which momentarily paused the fighting. "Stop!" Darui yelled aloud, still standing in his initial position, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "Just, let me do my sales pitch, please. I spent 2 hours preparing it to ensure it wouldn't be too dull." He tried to joke weakly. With that, the Kumo jonin awkwardly obeyed their commanding officer and retreated back to their previous positions while Ren was left standing on the side of the cliff, wondering what the hell just happened. "Well, will you rejoin us here, please?" Darui exasperatedly asked, beckoning him closer with his hand, but Ren just gave him a dull look. I don't know. You all seem a little bit too intense for my fragile sensibilities. It's nothing personal. Just all that oppressively masculine Kumo energy you are exuding is a bit stifling for a poor guy like me." Ren hummed and didn't move from his position, making Darui groan. This was probably not how the older man expected this meeting to go. But, tough luck. This was also not how Ren expected to spend his afternoon. His day was already ruined, so there was no reason not to ruin Darui's, even if only slightly. Hey, at this point, Ren took his victories where he could get them. Chapter 89, ch 89, Kumo's offeree. "Are you really going to make this more difficult than it needs to be?" Darui asked with a disappointed sigh. "How dull." Ren's lips twitched, but he stayed where he was and gave the man a small shrug. "You wanted to talk, so talk. Sound can reach me here just fine." It didn't hurt that it was also a very convenient position for Ren. The Kumo ninjas had to look up, and that meant they did not look down. "Kumo is interested in your services and in your seals." Darui decided the blunt approach was for the best, so he stopped with the small talk. But before Darui could continue, Ren chuckled and raised his eyebrow at the man. "And I suppose you wouldn't be a dear and give me a hint about who in Konoha tattled on me, would you? I'd rather not disclose the identity of our spies." Darui gave Ren a "what can you do" look, but maybe once your loyalty is proven. He offered, but he still seemed a bit shifty to Ren despite having a quite solid poker face. Honestly, this made no sense. If somebody from Konoha betrayed him and sent him into the Kumo's clutches, they would not do it just so he could get a recruitment speech. Nobody in Konoha would want him to join Kumo, not even the people who hated his guts. That meant this was the work of Kumo's spy network. But Kumo's spy network also couldn't penetrate the village's security to such a degree that they could willy-nilly insert missions into the village's mission office and ensure that the exact ninja they wished for would take them. That would have been a massive breach of security. It would have easily allowed them to assassinate many important ninjas. The first layer of security for every ninja village was secrecy. The enemy village could not send 10 jonin after Kakashi if they had no idea where he would be at any given moment when he was outside Konoha. No, such a security breach wouldn't be allowed to pass. If nothing else, Konoha took its security very seriously. This must have been an insider job. So, the natural conclusion Ren arrived at was, you were not hired to give a recruitment pitch. He narrowed his eyes at the ninja party in front of him. Still, 10 jonin? Wasn't that a little bit of overkill for a chunin like him? Couldn't they play by the rules and send some fresh-faced chunin after him? Seriously, these people had no concept of fair play. He was complaining just for the sake of complaining. This was so freaking frustrating. Hearing Ren's words, Darui's playful act instantly dropped. The man probably already knew Ren wouldn't take his offer, but he still tried to resolve this peacefully for one last time. "We are just the recruitment party," he insisted with a serious tone. "Right," Ren said, looking unimpressed as he gave the other 9 jonin an obvious look. His eyes briefly stopped on a blonde woman he recognized as Samui, but the other 8 were unknown to him. Probably some chumps who did not manage to get screen time in the anime. Unfortunately, that did not make them any less dangerous. "They are here for security reasons," Darui nonchalantly added. Both knew it was an unspoken threat. There weren't many favorable options Ren seemed to have. Fighting 10 jonin? That was the force a village usually employed against S-ranked criminals. Not for the first time, Ren cursed his encounter with Yagura. He came out of it in surprisingly great shape, and Yagura died. So, the other villages that didn't have the full picture probably made their own assumptions about his competence. Hence, 10 jonin. Sure, Konoha did claim that Yagura was killed by Akatsuki operatives, but intelligence and counterintelligence was a constant guessing game. Ren wouldn't be surprised if Kumo decided that Konoha was using Akatsuki to shift the blame. And since Ren was the only Konoha ninja to walk out of that conflict, only to start making some seriously powerful seals later on, this was definitely an unintended consequence of his actions, wasn't it? I guess saying no is not an option. Ren more stated than asked, feeling supremely nervous as he felt his clone using hiding like a mole technique to do some interesting things in the ground underneath 4 ninjas furthest away from the sensor. Frankly, he was continuing the conversation because he needed a distraction. Fighting all 10 jonin, whose abilities he didn't know about, was stupid. No, he needed to even out the numbers. He wasn't interested in their offer. It would have been a gilded cage, at best. He would have been happy if he was ever allowed to step outside of Kumo once he entered their village. Kumo always wanted Sealmasters and bloodlines. They are very well known for kidnapping children and adults alike. And Ren did not want to think about what their kidnapped victims with bloodlines went through in Kumo. It was distasteful. But Kumo was the only ninja village that wasn't made by a ninja. The first Reikage was a bandit. One who was just lucky enough to loot an experimental jutsu from a ninja corpse he found when he was young. The man then spent the next 30 years improving said technique until it became the fabled lightning chakra armor. Well, a crude version of it, at least. But the man still dominated the land of lightning with it. He knew no other jutsu, not even the basic ones, but he didn't need them to slaughter anybody in his way. To this day, his descendants focus solely on this technique, and it is working very well for them. When the formation of Konoha happened, the man realized which way the wind was blowing and decided to put his career as the leader of a bandit group behind him in favor of creating his own ninja village. Most ninja clans kinda fled from him. That was partially the reason why Kumo did not have that many clans. The man was supposed to be unpleasant and apparently demanded a tribute from any clan that came under his banner, their knowledge and an important woman of his choice from their clan. And let's just say the first Reikage did not care if said woman was married or not. Needless to say, it was non-negotiable. Refusal was met with slaughter as he plundered the knowledge anyway and took the woman by force after he subjugated the remainder of the clan. Frankly, Kimagakure people were still, to this day, acting more like bandits willing to do mercenary jobs rather than proper ninjas. Despite the previous Reikages trying to clean up their act, their reputation was still god-awful. The first Reikage was actually burnt to death by Hashirama when the man attempted to kidnap Mito after she sealed Kyuubi into herself. In exchange and as an apology for killing the Reikage, and honestly, Ren thought Hashirama should have just stomped Kumo to the ground right there and then, but the man was a bit too naive at times. Hashirama went and hunted the Haxabi who made himself into a nuisance in the lands that would a year later unify into the land of lightning. Hashirama subdued the beast, and Mito sealed it into a chosen container. That was their first mistake because, in the following year, they kinda had to give similar benefits to other rising hidden villages to keep the status quo. To ensure Kumo would not instantly declare war against the budding Iwa or Kiri, dragging the whole ninja world into it, because they now had a Jinchuriki and others didn't. It would have been a funny story if Kumo had stopped right there. They failed to get an Uzumaki. That should have been it. But the second Reikage, who was the son of the first, took the failure a tad bit too personally. Fast forward a few years, and Uzushio was destroyed. Yeah, Hashirama really should have stomped Kumo into the ground in its cradle. Of course, it was just a coincidence that around 15 years after the Uzushio's fall, Kumo gained a sudden uptick of red-haired orphan ninjas who usually sported skin tones native to Kimagakure. Because, naturally, not all Uzumaki died in the attack. And since this was Kumo, Ren imagined that any unfortunate captive was chained to bed and, yeah, Konoha had its own dark secrets. But at least, they were not freaking known for being absolute dipsits to everything around them. No, I am afraid I cannot take no for an answer. Darui lazily answered Ren's question. But don't be dull. Come on, man. We are prepared to accommodate you. Your seals are valuable. Money, power, or even women. Kumo can give them to you in exchange for your service. You will have everything you could ever want. Except for freedom. Ren inwardly scoffed. You are saying that as if you were giving me a choice here. He outwardly huffed and crossed his arms under his chest, donning a pondering look to sell the image of somebody who was thinking about it. His clone was almost done with its work. I am giving you a choice. Darui shrugged. You can come willingly, or I can beat you within an inch of your life and drag you to Kumo by your hair. He nonchalantly said, don't make this harder than it needs to be. For both our sakes. At that moment, Ren realized why Darui opted for a more non-violent approach. The man didn't seem very motivated. He looked like somebody who was given an unpleasant task at work and now needs to fulfill it despite wanting to do anything else. You are coming with us anyway, but coming willingly will be beneficial to you. Darui nodded with his head towards Samui. Your gaze lingered on her. You can have her in your bed tonight. And if your seals are useful enough, you can have her for the rest of your life. Ren almost snorted at the undertone of reluctance in the man's tone as he gave him that offer. But fair enough. They didn't know much about him. Darui was working with the information and resources he had available. And yes, Ren's gaze did linger on Samui, so the man probably understood it as interest. Heh. Ren rolled his eyes as he opted for replying with sarcasm. Your sales pitch is really hitting me in the feels. I am almost gushing with certainty that I won't find myself in her position in the future. Darui awkwardly scratched his cheek as he gave Ren a sheepish smile in return. Depends on your usefulness, to be honest. Good seals are in high demand. Kumo will treat you well. He then nodded with his head towards Samui. But there is only so much she can do for the village. She is good at swinging her sword, but so are many others. Other than that, she is hot. She doesn't mind. He glanced at the blonde woman who, during all that speech, didn't move a muscle. Do you, Samui? I am cool with doing my duty for the village, she said in a cold tone, completely calmly with no emotion. Ren gave her a deadpan look. You don't sound like you like it very much. But Samui only calmly insisted that it's cool. Yeah, sure it was. Ren could almost feel the frigid effort she was putting into seducing him. It was positively arctic. Darui, to give him some credit, looked a bit uncomfortable at that moment. But when Ren looked at him, he just sighed, "It is what it is, man." They silently stared at each other, Ren occasionally looking at Samui, whose face was still locked in her perfect poker face, not moving a single muscle as she dispassionately stared at Ren. It took 2 minutes until Darui finally realized this was going nowhere. "Ha! You aren't going to take the carrot, are you?" he regretfully asked, his shoulders slumping as he slowly unsheathed his sword. "I am happily in a relationship." Ren smirked at him, feeling that his clone was finally done with its job. "Sucks. Stick it is, then." Darui grunted and lowered his body into a fighting stance when he was startled by a booming explosion that suddenly erupted to his right, causing screams of fright and pain to reverberate through the surroundings. Chapter 90 CH90 vs Kumo Jonin. As the underground clone activated the explosion and blew up the group furthest from the censor woman to Darui's right side, Ren was ready. In the second it took the remaining Kumo Jonin to come out of their shock and refocus on him, Ren had already etched 2 seals on the kunao in his hands and threw them. One headed toward a random Jonin while the other sailed through the air, targeting the censor kunoichi. The random Jonin elected to raise an earth wall, which would have been effective against a normal explosive seal. Unfortunately for him, Ren opted for something more brutal. As the kunao hit the earth wall and the seal triggered, a chunk of it in a circular radius around where the kunao had landed was instantly turned into salt alongside the torso of the ninja standing behind it. Only the upper part of his head above the nose and the lower parts of his legs below the knees were outside of the explosive radius, so they flopped onto the newly made pile of salt on the ground, dyeing it red as blood started to flow out. The censor kunoichi, however, realized that there was an unknown seal on the kunao and opted to evade it rather than block it, so the kunao just sailed past her previous position and hit the tree behind where she was standing, turning it into glass as a cold sweat washed over her when she witnessed it. Sadly, Ren didn't have the leisure to see it. Pretty much the second he threw the kunao, he had to throw his body to the left because Darui blasted some kind of technique at him, firing a bolt of extra fast black lightning toward him. Ren rolled on the surface of the side of the cliff and barely managed to get back on his feet when Samui was already upon him, viciously slashing her sword at him with sparkling streaks of lightning chakra coating the blade. Ren evaded the first slash, but the lighting on her sword still managed to clip him and jolt him, making him realize how dangerous the blonde woman was. It gave him a proper scare, and it was unexpected enough to make him hesitate for a moment. But despite missing the first slash, Samui just adjusted her grip on the sword and swung it back at Ren in a very well-practiced combo of fast slashes. Because of his slight hesitation, Ren only managed to evade the first 2. His eyes widening, Ren realized there would be no evading the third one as Samui's sword suddenly accelerated via some unknown internal lightning technique. He managed to summon 2 kunao to his hands and flood them with wind chakra as he crossed them and blocked the sword crashing down on his left shoulder. He was a little bit too late, however, and Samui's sword bit into his shoulder, drawing blood. It was barely a glancing wound, but the lightning from her blade streamed into Ren's body, numbing it and increasing the damage. Realizing it, Ren didn't hesitate and forcefully pushed Samui's sword away from his body, making the slash wound worse in return but preventing himself from being stunned. All that happened in 3 seconds, and by the end of it, the other Kumo ninjas were already almost upon him. As Samui was forced to take a step back to regain control of her sword because of the force with which Ren parried it, 2 Kumo ninjas were already in a position to execute a pincer attack on him, one coming at him from his right side while Darui was coming from his left, both swinging their swords at him. Swearing in his mind about Kumo and their usage of swords due to overcompensating for small dick sizes, Ren glanced to the side from where a loud screaming was coming from, only to see that his initial explosive attack killed 2 Kumo Jonin while the third was screaming himself hoarse on the ground in a puddle of his blood as chunks of his body were torn when the shrapnel made of earth hit him from below. He was out of it due to pain but still alive, which was just perfect. The swords neared Ren, and he offhandedly threw the 2 kunao in his hands up, letting them gently, almost lazily, spin in the air just as the attack struck, only for their victim to let out a surprised bloody gurgle. Darui's uncovered eye widened as he realized his sword was now up to the hilt in his comrade's chest because Ren had used the substitution technique at the last second. He quickly moved to pull it out on instinct, and despite his shock, he noticed the 2 kunao spinning in the air just slightly above them. "Oh, Darui cursed and quickly leaped back as the kunao exploded and reduced the struck gurgling Kumo Jonin into a shower of bloody meat chunks. Darui was quick enough to dodge, but his pincer attack comrade was more unlucky. His sword had also pierced the unfortunate Kumo ninja through the chest, but it hit the chest bone and got stuck there. That took his attention. It was just a split second, but that moment was enough to make him notice the dangerous kunao a bit too late. As he jumped back to evade the explosion, he tried to cover his face and chest with his arms as much as possible, but the metal shrapnel his sword turned into due to the explosion still managed to make his arms more or less useless. The man, however, survived and got out of the way of his comrades. After the substitution, Ren didn't get even a second of reprieve. His body still somewhat numb from Samui's lightning, he reacted too late as he felt a sword skewer him from behind, making him gasp in disbelief and pain as he saw the blade exit out of his stomach. A Kumo Jonin was patiently waiting for a chance for an ambush, and now he successfully got it. For a moment, Ren thought this was it for him before he registered a nudge of chakra and quickly, almost desperately, allowed it to do its thing. His shadow clone substituted with him, the technique ripping the Kumo Jonin's sword from his hands as the grinning clone appeared in front of the man. The clone's arms quickly embraced the Jonin, exploding seals etched all over his clothes. Leroy Jenkins, motherfucker, the clone vindictively screamed as it exploded, and the Kumo Jonin was reduced to red splatter on the ruined and cratered ground with a bang. Ren appeared on a tree branch a bit farther away from the area where they fought and leaned heavily on the tree trunk, letting out a pained grunt. He idly recognized why Orochimaru primarily used something as useless as mud clones for last-minute substituting. The shadow clones were neat, but they also cost way too much freaking chakra. He offhandedly decided to learn a cheaper clone variant if he survived. Ren had realized the only reason why he was not dead yet was that the guy did try to take him alive. Worse yet, he only had a few seconds before the remaining Kumo ninjas discovered where the substitution technique had delivered him. They did have a sensor ninja, so running was not an option, especially not while wounded. Wincing in pain, he looked at his stomach, where he had a puncture wound going all the way from his back to his stomach. It was bleeding quite badly, and there was no way he could fight properly with it. The pain was distracting enough that he knew he would mess up against the heavily speed-based fighting style of his opponents. Ninja fights usually ended quickly, and one hit was all it took to decide the outcome. Naruto was an outlier, not the norm. Now that Ren was wounded, the situation did not look very favorable for him. 3, 1, and 1 more. Ren quickly did the mental math to count how many of the Kumo ninjas he had killed by now. He counted 5. That meant 5 were still unfortunately alive. Darui, Samui, the censor woman, the man with hurt arms, and the last one, probably a medic? Or worse, the triumph card. Sage, Ren hoped he was a medic. Damn. Fighting Jonins is a pain in the ass. He thought with a painful grimace as he started creating a small seal with his chakra and blood on his shirt under the wound. Ren realized that he lacked training in facing multiple opponents who could keep up with him. There weren't many chances to train for that outside of joining Umbu or having Jonin friends. Sadly, Hinata and Ino were good enough to give him the needed combat experience in facing multiple opponents. They were not quick enough to keep up with him just yet. Funnily enough, Ren would probably have a much easier time facing one S-rank ninja than 10 Jonin. Heh. I guess that's also something to rectify if I get back home in one piece, he thought. 3 seconds later, when the seal was done, Ren let out a relieved sigh as a small-scale invisible time-stop bubble formed around his wound, and his shoulders sagged. It wasn't ideal, but he was no longer bleeding out and could fight again. Still, he felt the weirdness of having a part of his body stopped in time. It was probably not a good idea to do this for long. Stopping the time of an entire organism was harmless because everything was stopped at once, but stopping only a part? The very first thing that popped into Ren's mind was a question of how the blood flow would even work in this kind of state, and yeah, he probably really should get out of here as fast as possible and seek a medic. He never tested the side effects of stopping only a part of somebody's body, and for all he knew, he could drop dead out of nowhere because of it in a minute. Unfortunately, beggars couldn't be choose dash. Ren ducked as Darui appeared on the branch next to him out of nowhere and sent a horizontal decapitating slash at Ren's neck, giving him the message that the Kumo ninjas no longer gave a crap about capturing him. Ren and Darui's eyes met, and Ren saw that the dark man was furious. Smirking, although it came out as more of a grimace than a smirk, Ren let his body fall to the left before using his chakra to prop himself against the thick tree branch, straight toward the censor woman. He needed to take her out if he wanted to get a chance to run away, or even start using ceiling traps. That would make this whole thing much easier. Realizing Ren's plan, Darui jumped after him, but a seal Ren left on the branch while jumping exploded, and while it did not hurt him because he was already mid-air, it did send him off his flying course and made him tumble through the air toward the ground. The last unknown Kumo Jonin, the one who had not participated up till now and who was most likely tending to the arms of his wounded comrade, tried to intercept Ren, but much to his shock, Ren ignored him as his sword bounced off of the chakra shield that suddenly appeared around Ren. Seeing Ren barreling his way toward her through the air, the censor Kunoichi's eyes momentarily widened, but she got into a stance with her sword, determination entering her brown eyes. Ren threw a kunao at her, and she evaded it by sidestepping, not dropping her guard by jumping away because she sensed that there was no seal on it. She inwardly scoffed, as if such a bluff could work on her dash. Ren suddenly substituted with the kunao, appearing right behind the censor Kunoichi. He didn't have the time to make a seal. The woman would react sooner. Her comrades would react sooner. But there was one thing that he did have, and that was fast enough. All the hours spent helping Hinata with her lightning release paid off because Ren learned a few techniques alongside her just to be able to give her advice. One such technique was a D-rank lightning release sudden blackout. It was basically a ninja version of a taser. It required touch. It was weak. It could be resisted if the enemy had even a second to brace himself. And no self-respecting ninja would ever use it in combat. It was a garbage technique, but it was quick as hell to use, and it didn't require hand seals. Plus, his opponent did not expect it. Ren's hand quickly neared the censor woman's back as invisible lightning chakra flooded it. He was almost there, almost touching her. Samui abruptly appeared in a body flicker and kicked the censor Kunoichi in the stomach, sending her body crashing back through the air, saving her from being knocked out. But in doing so, the blonde busty woman got into the path of Ren's hand, and it landed on her shoulder before she could react, causing her eyes to widen for a moment as her body jerked and spasmed, and she released a strained ugh. Samui's eyes then rolled back, and she fell bonelessly onto the ground. Ren's head snapped toward the censor Kunoichi, inwardly feeling both glad and annoyed that he had taken out Samui, who was the bigger threat, but had failed to get rid of the censor. A kunai puffed into his hand, and he intended to finish the unconscious Samui off with an exploding seal before focusing again on the sensor kunoichi, only for him to gasp as a bolt of black lightning came out of the tree lean and hit him in the chest, going straight through it. Ren only barely managed to shift his body at the last second on sheer instinct, enabling him to survive as it pierced his lung instead of his heart. Strength suddenly left his legs as blood gushed out of his chest wound, and he stumbled forward before falling on his knees and hands right next to the Samui's unconscious body just as Darui, twigs and leaves in his hair, slowly walked from behind a tree with a slight limp because a bit of tree bark shrapnel from Ren's last seal hit him in the back and legs. Darui stopped 5 steps away from Ren, cautious of him counterattacking out of nowhere and evading death by pulling out some sort of substitution or sealing trick again. They fell for it enough for him to get a healthy dose of respect for it by now. How dull. You should have taken the offer. Darui annoyedly muttered with narrowed eyes, looking down on Ren as he, on his hands and knees, looked up and saw black lightning crackling around Darui's hand that was pointing at him. Game over. This universe grows with every follower. Are you part of Infinite Novel yet? Chapter 91, ch 91. You are already dead. Game over. The black lightning from Darui's hand shot toward Ren's head, intending to end him while Darui dispassionately stared, assured of his victory. There was no way that, with his injuries, Ren could move in time to evade it. But just as the black lightning was about to hit, a blue but still translucent chakra barrier formed around Ren and the unconscious body of Samui, causing the lightning to slam into it with a crackling boom before it fizzled out in short order. Seeing it, the startled Darui tensed, expecting a counterattack, but a moment passed, and Ren was still kneeling while wheezing on the ground, a red puddle of blood forming underneath him at an alarming rate. Darui's eyebrows furrowed as he stood back and studied the barrier for a moment. Unable to discern anything of note from a glance, he cautiously approached under the tired gaze of his defeated opponent. Raising his sword, he started slashing at it, his sword bouncing off with every strike. He coated his sword in black lightning and tried to overwhelm the barrier, but it was to no avail as it didn't even flicker despite him delivering over 30 quick slashes within 10 seconds. Inside the barrier, a very small, bloody but self-satisfied smile appeared on Ren's exhausted face. Heh. Performance issues, he slowly rasped out with a hollow amusement in his tone as blood flowed down his chin. Small dick no go th dash, cough, through, well, Darui had to give it to Ren. He was one tenacious bastard, with one foot in the grave, but he still had the gall to taunt him. It was a pity he had refused the offer and killed so many of his comrades. Darui imagined they would have hit it off as friends under different circumstances. Darui released an annoyed sigh before glancing toward their censor ninja, Miki. The kunoichi was chewing on her lower lip in frustration, narrowing her eyes while staring into nowhere as if she was trying to find something. Hearing his question, she spoke, I don't kn dash, wait. Her gaze suddenly lingered on the bloody puddle underneath Ren, and she pursed her lips before turning around, and her eyes swept through the battlefield. The blood. She mumbled aloud while her eyebrows rose in surprise before she looked at Ren, wondering how he managed to set something like this up. In many places where he was hit or touched with his hands and feet, there are some sort of symbols made out of his blood. She told Darui. It creates a formation that powers the barrier. Somehow. Listening to her analysis, it was obvious to Ren that the woman was no fuinjutsu user. She tracked the chakra, and that's where her expertise ended. She had it wrong, but he wouldn't be telling her that. It was good for him. It made him feel relieved. But really, he was just glad that Darui had stopped hitting his barrier. It was pretty tough as it was the same seal that had withstood Yagura's Baiju Utama previously. Just, a lot more underpowered because he was previously using the chakra he had stored in his chakra storage seal for the seals made out of his blood instead. These seals were not meant to create a defensive technique. It was supposed to be his finishing move, but he had to improvise, and so, he only had around 40% of his chakra storage seal left to create the barrier. As inviolable as it seemed when it didn't even flicker under Darui's onslaught of hits, Ren knew it wasn't as durable as it first appeared. It's why he didn't interrupt Darui and Miki and stayed silent as he observed them trying to find a solution to his unexpected barrier. It was a much better alternative for him than for them trying to break through it by force. He just needed time. How could you miss something like that? Darui reproachfully asked the woman, who huffed in irritation in return. Give me a break. I was on a watch against a seal trap in kanji. Not whatever this is. She retorted. I'll need a second to try to figure out what he is trying to do with the blood seals. Just tell me where they are, and I can destroy them, Darui offered, but the kunoichi shook her head. They have the same chakra barrier around them, just more translucent, so it is not easily visible, she said idly as she focused on her sensing skills. Taking a deep breath, Darui groaned. He turned toward Ren and crouched on the ground in front of the barrier. Man, you are a troublesome fellow. Shaking his head in exasperation, he chuckled, how dull. But it does not matter. You will still bleed out. It's simple logic. So, would you be up to accepting my previous offer? Obviously, you will probably have to be under a very strict probation and guard for the next decade or 3, but at least you will be alive? Come on, dude. As angry as he felt, the seals he had witnessed could prove to be a game-changer in Kumo's hands. He didn't think Ren would accept, but maybe. Heh. Fuck your logic. Ren deadpanned before visibly wincing in pain as he wheezed for a breath. Just dash, he gasped, give me a second. I'll stand up and kick your ass in a moment. Right. Darui couldn't help but smile. That threat would probably sound far more menacing if Ren's voice wasn't so weak and he didn't look half dead. You won't even see it coming. Ren mumbled, his voice growing quieter. And Darui's smile became wry. I am sure I won't. The thing he was no longer sure of was if Mickey could crack the barrier before Ren actually croaked. The Konoha ninja was trying to press his hand on his still bleeding wound to stave off the bleeding, but Darui could see he got him good. The stubborn fool did not have much time left. Sighing, Darui's shoulders slumped. This gives me mixed feelings, yeah no, he sighed and took out a cigarette and put it into his mouth. Your counterattack coming yet? I am about to die out of boredom waiting for it over here. He tried to keep Ren talking, because a speaking opponent meant an alive opponent. Honestly, Darui was conflicted because a part of him wanted Ren to die while another part wanted to drag him back to Kumo alive and force him to work for them. Suddenly, Darui's wry smile fell as the slight shaking of Ren's exhausted body stilled. For a moment, he thought that Ren had died right there, still kneeling on the ground, but then Ren raised his head, expending energy he should not possess anymore, and defiantly looked Darui straight in the eyes. You are already dead, he told the man somewhat smugly. Well, as smugly as a half-dead, exhausted man could sound. You already said that. Darui rolled his eyes at him. Anything any dash, but his speech was interrupted when Mickey, the censor Kunoichi, suddenly loudly yelled to run as she felt the massive spike in chakra coming from the blood seals on the ground. Several things happened at once. Darui's eyes widened in alarm, and he jumped back onto his feet. Mickey and the other two still alive Kumo ninjas who stood further away had turned on their heels before desperately trying to jump away from the area. Lastly, Ren put his hand on Samui just as he finished charging his transportation seal. He wasn't sure if he should have taken her with him or let her die in here, but he had wanted to know who hired Kumo for his assassination. Chances were, she would not have that information, and Ren also doubted the culprit would use his real name for the request. If Danzo Shimura or some other high-ranked man from Konoha gave an assassination mission to Kumo, it would raise many eyebrows. Kumo would definitely not accept such a mission, thinking it is a trap. No, Ren was mostly sure that he would get nothing important out of Samui, but he was still curious. So, he took her with him. Besides, Ino needed a proper target for her new mental techniques. Training it on her unwitting classmates could get her only so far. An enemy Jonin Kunoichi could help her fine-tune it, willingly or not. That was a bit harsh, but Ren didn't feel very merciful right now. He was still bleeding out because he couldn't focus both on the time-stop seal, which could stop his injuries from killing him, and charge the transportation seal at the same time. Darui wouldn't give him an additional 20 seconds if he thought something was wrong. He would try to break the barrier by force. So, Ren had to risk it and go for the transportation seal first. Teleporting from the battlefield, Ren landed on his couch in his apartment, the same one he landed on after fighting Yagura. Once more, by pure coincidence, Ino was there, staring at him in bewilderment while holding a watering can in her hand and looking at him like a deer into headlights. Ren found the sight funny, for all of a split second, before Samui's unconscious body came crashing onto him, driving his breath from his lungs as hot searing pain shot through his body. He wheezed with wide eyes from the agony as Samui's body slid off of him onto the ground, making him bleed even more as her landing aggravated his injuries. Oh, hello, darling. Could you get Hinata for me? Ren breathlessly asked Ino with a pain-filled grimace on his face. Again, Ino exclaimed as she got out of her momentary shock. She quickly summoned a shadow clone that ran out of the room while the original Ino leaped toward Ren before her hand started glowing green, and she began to give him the medic ninja-style first aid. After the last time, Ino learned at least enough medical ninjutsu to give first aid and prevent somebody from dying due to his injuries. But even then, she cursed and moaned all the way through the book learning, much to Hinata's and Ren's joint amusement and annoyance. They both decided never to even try to have Ino learn more medical ninjutsu ever again. It would be too bothersome. And this time you bought another girl home, Ino huffed, pressing her hand onto the injury on Ren's chest while glancing at Samui, or rather, her notable assets. She pursed her lips, and Ren could almost read her mind. Samui was another blonde like Ino. So, he reckoned that Ino was probably comparing her size to Samui's and found herself lacking. He couldn't help but chuckle. Hearing him, Ino quickly realized she was busted. She clicked her tongue and gently patted Ren's forehead with her palm. Hush, you. She sighed, worry seeping into her voice. What am I going to do with you? Starting to feel a bit better, Ren finally relaxed and gave Ino a weak smile. Well, if you were offering, I wouldn't say no to a lap pillow. Back in the battlefield, a split second after Ren teleported away, the seals made out of his blood went off. Mickey, the censor Kunoichi, had just barely managed to give a warning to her comrades before leaping headfirst out of the area of effect she could sense. But she was just slightly too late and still in midair. She felt her legs be affected before she landed on the ground with a painful shriek. Sobbing in agony and quietly cursing a storm under her nose, she ignored the flood of pain as she pushed herself up from the ground with her hands, but a spike of fear ran through her head when she realized she couldn't feel her legs. Bravely chancing a look down, her heart almost stopped when she found out that everything below her knees was turned into stone. With a whimper, she realized her career as a kunoichi was officially over. Suddenly, her eyes widened. Darui, she shouted and looked back, only for her mind to go blank as her eyes landed on a statue of her commanding officer, locked in a running motion and sporting a desperate expression, just a few steps from where she knew was the border of the attack's area of effect. He was dead. Taking a shuddering breath, Mickey tried to stand up, only to tumble back onto the ground. Due to shock, for a moment, she had forgotten that her legs were no longer functional. Cursing as she almost fell down on her face, she spotted Riki, the medic ninja of their group. She hadn't known the man well, and now she would never get the chance to rectify that because the left side of his body was turned into stone. Naturally, that killed him. Desperately wishing to find somebody alive, Miki frantically looked around until her gaze landed on a body lying on the other side of the clearing. It was petrified from the half of its stomach down, but the chest was still moving. Norio. Miki quickly recognized the person and dragged herself toward him on the ground, using only her hands. When she got close, she winced. The man's arms were still ruined. Riki did a good job fixing the most important issues and taking out the metal shrapnel, but the whole fight didn't last very long, so he didn't have the time to fix everything. Not even 10 minutes had passed since the fighting started, and it was already over. Miki turned Norio's body around so he could lie on his back, causing the man to wake up with a groan. He sluggishly opened his eyes, only to instantly squint them at her. "Ah, Miki." Norio spoke dispassionately with the tone of somebody who had realized the harsh reality and didn't intend to fight it. "I am dead, aren't I?" Miki's breath hitched for a moment before she tried to give him an encouraging smile. "No, not yet. You will be just fine." Her hands involuntarily clutched at his shirt. "Just hang on. I'll dash bullshit." Norio interrupted her, grasping her right hand in his palms. They looked at each other for a few silent moments as the soft breeze passed them by. "Just, give me a hand, lass," Norio eventually said with a shaky, wet voice as he put a kunao in her hand. "Please." He fearfully gulped and closed his eyes. Miki sniffed and felt a lump forming in her throat as she tightly clutched the kunao. They both knew his intestines were done for. Even if his injuries were treated and he was kept alive, he would still starve to death. They had no way to reverse the petrification. Gritting her teeth, Miki angrily yelled as she swung the kunao, stabbing it straight into Norio's brain through his closed left eye. He died instantly and didn't feel a thing. Falling on her rear, Miki, with a wet whimper, watched in mute horror as blood slowly flowed onto the ground from Norio's eye socket, before she let out a disbelieving laugh. Fucking hell. She looked around the battlefield with a numbing detachment as she realized she was the only survivor. The wreckage needs to be informed of this. Miki muttered to herself with yet another shuddering breath. Yes, I have to do that. She could mentally fall into pieces later on. For now, she had to do her last duty as Kumo Kunoichi. She started to drag herself on the ground by her hands in the direction of the borders of the Land of Lightning. Chapter 92, Ch 92, Recuperation. "I won't be able to persuade you to let me chain you to the bed until you make full recovery, will I?" Hinata asked in a nonplussed conversational tone as she gently pressed her green glowing hand on top of Ren's chest where his biggest wound was located, but her voice betrayed that she had already given up on that endeavor even before uttering her question. Ren, who laid on his bed all bandaged up, gave her a rueful smile. "Just get me up and running, Hina. I will throw a tantrum and get Sarutobi to give me another paid leave or something later, but first, I need to get properly back to the village in a believable manner and report that I have been attacked." It was a very similar situation to what happened to him after fighting Yagura, and Ren absolutely hated it. He would just love to say screw everything and stay here, in his house in the capital where they relocated after Hinata arrived, until he fully recuperated under the tender and gentle watch and touch of his adorable fussy Hyaga nurse. But he needed to give the story to the Hokage first and control the narrative somewhat. If he let somebody like, say, Danzo, make some sort of story first, then Ren would be forced into a reactionary position. That wouldn't be fun at all. Ninjas are liars. It is a major part of their trade. Ren had no doubt at all that Danzo or even many of the other high-ranked officials from Konoha who disliked him could spin the narrative in such a way that Ren would find himself in the position of a suspected traitor rather than a victim of a trap and an assassination attempt. Looking at the cutely scrunched and exasperated expression of the lovely girl who had put him back together in just a few hours, Ren couldn't help but be proud of how skilled his student had become with her medical skills. He was almost knocking on death's door, and yet, just a few hours later, he felt he could go another round with the Kumo Jonin. Yeah, that was probably some of the drugs she stuffed into him speaking. He was still injured, after all. But he did feel great. He would need to ask Hinata what the heck she fed him. Things were just a bit floaty, and was that a crumple-horned snorkack laughing at high dash? Hinata's chakra suddenly jolted Ren out of his reverie as it cleared the fog in his mind, making his cheek burn red from embarrassment. Hinata was working on clearing the remnants of drugs from his system right now, so he occasionally spaced out and didn't think clearly. She had to go hard with the dosage because he was quite far gone by the time she got to him. Fortunately, people would be surprised just what kind of things a Hyaga heiress could access. Some of the medicine she used was probably heavily restricted. Ren had no idea where she had gotten it, and he kinda didn't even want to ask. That could make it his problem. "No, thank you." A small, amused smile appeared on Hinata's face as she ducked her head, which made her fringe cover her eyes. "It will scar if I hurry it up. On both sides. The attack went straight through your chest." She mumbled worriedly while gently tracing her finger under the wound as wisps of medical chakra soothingly seeped into Ren's skin. Inwardly, Ren winced. Yeah, he didn't like that. Scars were not his thing. They were not a badge of honor but a reminder that he fucked up. But stifling a sigh, he chuckled instead and tried to reassure the girl. "I heard chicks dig scars." He quipped and raised his eyebrow while giving Hinata an expectant look. Hinata snorted and pressed her finger more firmly into Ren's chest. "Good then that I am not a chick," she cheekily replied. I don't know. You look like a chick to me. What else would you be? Ren grinned at her and enjoyed how she bit her quivering lower lip, trying to look stern while suppressing her urge to grin back at him. He knew her well and had no doubts that if he wasn't her injured patient, he would have her straddling him already, and they would be making out by now. Sweeping her fringe out of her eyes with her free hand, Hinata gave Ren a peeved look, but she let her lips curl into a small smirk. A lion, obviously, she said in a matter-of-fact tone as she pawed her free hand at him. Rawr. That made Ren laugh hard until he suddenly started coughing, and his chest flared with pain, prematurely ending his fun with a small groan. Chuckling, Hinata stood up, pressing her palm into his chest as she leaned forward and delivered a quick kiss to Ren's lips before pulling away and sitting back on the chair next to his bed. Don't worry. As long as you get back home alive, I will get you back on your feet. She fondly whispered, and slid her free hand into Ren's grasp. But don't make a habit out of this, please. I don't like seeing you like this. And I know that Ino hates it, too. They settled into a companionable silence, only the quiet hum of soothing medical chakra spreading through the room as Hinata continued her work. The mission was a trap, Ren eventually said. He knew Hinata was dying to know more about what caused his sorry state, but she still had her shy moments and probably didn't know how to ask. So, Ren volunteered the situation willingly, rather than let her set wild Ino on him to find out. I see. Hinata's expression darkened as she frowned. Kumo, there was something unsettling in the way she said it, and Ren remembered she had her own history with that ninja village. Sighing, Ren lightly shook his head. She wasn't asking who was the tool. She already knew that. No, she was asking who the mastermind was. If only. Ren looked her straight in the eyes. Somebody from Konoha. Nobody else could set the situation up so perfectly. That made her expression go from dark to complicated really fast. But she didn't look shocked, just sorrowful. Both she and Ino have been sheltered in the village since their birth. They were never shown how cruel and insidious the world could be. Ren has been working to remedy their naivete during the past several months. He mostly told them stories, cautionary tales, about all the ninjas Konoha or other villages had screwed up over the years. Hakura's story was their favorite so far, and they found it very sad. But this was pretty much the first time they got a first-hand experience with betrayal within the village. Honestly, Ren would have preferred it happen differently, but it was what it was. I see. Hinata muttered and fell silent once more. Ren didn't say anything else for the next few minutes, letting her think on her own. He wasn't trying to portray Konoha as the bad guys and make Ino and Hinata hate the village or something similarly childish. He just wanted his girls to be able to think for themselves without assuming that rainbows were shooting from the Will of Fire's rear. The Ninja Academy was very good at making kids believe nonsense like that. Realistically, neither of the two girls was ever going to turn on Konoha, and Ren was fully aware of it. This was the place where their families lived, worked, and bled for generations. And Ren didn't hate Konoha. He just disliked a few people leading it and thought they were in an acute need of fatal dismembering. If only it were that easy. He, more or less, just wanted to prevent a situation where the Konohan leadership would try to use Hinata and Ino against him. He wasn't teaching them just so they could pull the tacky on him and try to kill him later down the line because that's what the village wants, and the village is always right. Nor was he interested in being put in Sarutobi's place where his very own student he spent years of his life teaching was now trying to kill him. Seeing the tension leaving Hinata's shoulders, Ren realized she was done with her thinking. He was a bit curious about her conclusion, but rather than open such a heavy topic, he instead smirked at the Hyuga girl and decided to bring some levity into the situation. If you are a lion, then what is Ino? He cheekily asked the girl, causing her eyes to mirthfully gleam. Chapter 93, ch 93 Ino is. Ino, Hinata hummed in a pondering fashion, giving the question proper consideration before she giggled. Ino is a chihuahua, always barking and trying to make herself look bigger than she is. Ren snickered. Oh, I don't think she would agree with you. He could actually see it, though. If Ino heard Hinata right now, her ranting, aka barking, would be legendary. I am sure she wouldn't. Hinata mirthfully rolled her eyes. If you asked the bimbo, she would try claiming to be something way cooler. Right. Ren nodded. She would probably say something ridiculous like she is a lion or something. He gave Hinata a teasing grin and pawed his hand at her in imitation of her previous gesture. Rawr. Hinata mock-gasped before giving Ren a pout. That's rich, coming from a hamster, she said in a mock-peeved tone. Hearing her, Ren's mind froze for a second before he registered what she said and couldn't help but exclaim, a hamster. He was no hamster. Yeah. Small, cute, and cuddly, what else could you be? Hinata quickly nodded her head several times with a fake, overly innocent look. Ren deadpanned at her in return and spoke, you got it wrong. You are totally an alpaca. Just spitting the facts left and right. What is an alpaca? Hinata blinked in confusion. Of course, as a good teacher, Ren just had to show her. He cast a genjutsu and made an illusion of a buck-toothed alpaca appear in the middle of the room, chewing on some grass. Furrowing her eyebrows, Hinata looked at the alpaca before slowly turning her head back to Ren, looking distinctly unamused. Really? That's how you see me? She flatly asked before looking at the alpaca again. But the alpaca was ready, and the second Hinata's face was fully turned toward it, it raised its head and looked Hinata into her eyes, before spitting straight in the girl's face, causing her to reel back from shock. That is an alpaca. Ren gleefully exclaimed as Hinata's hand instinctively reached toward her face to wipe the spin away, but Ren had just ended the genjutsu, and the illusion vanished, leaving Hinata's face spotless. Exasperatedly shaking her head, Hinata tried to hide her amusement so she could give Ren a stern, reproachful look, but on her, it just looked adorable, making it very hard for Ren to feel chastised. "Is that how you treat your healer?" Hinata eventually said when Ren didn't look even a bit apologetic. Well, a lion would be able to deal with a simple alpaca, so. Ren shrugged in a what can you do kind of way and gave Hinata a small, fake humble smile. "Fuck you." Hinata swatted at Ren's shoulder in return with an annoyed huff. "You wish." Ren caught Hinata's hand and brought it toward his lips before kissing its back, making Hinata ruefully sigh. "Not until you are fit," she said sadly. "That's really disheartening. I was looking forward to it when you returned from the mission, but you just had to ruin it by getting attacked, didn't you?" "Totally not my fault." Ren protested under Hinata's disappointed gaze, which made him feel oddly defensive. Knowing it was working, Hinata continued to silently stare at Ren, making him squirm for a few seconds until he decided it was time for a change in topic. "So, anyways, where is Ino?" he asked, averting his eyes away from Hinata while inwardly grumbling. That was as smooth as Naruto's brain. "She took the blonde woman to the basement and is mind-walking her right now to see why Kumo tried to kill you," Hinata casually said, and Ren groaned. "Be a dear and go tell her to be gentle. I don't want Samui to get an aneurysm in the coming hours because Ino is overly zealous and overdoes it," he exasperatedly requested, earning a suspicious look from Hinata. "Samui, huh?" she idly asked, but her eyes betrayed her distaste. Already on a first-name basis with her, Ren blinked. Oh, that was precious. She was jealous. Well, to be fair, both Ino and Hinata knew he wasn't one to take prisoners, so, him taking Samui with him probably weirded them out. Not to mention the fact that Samui was indeed an extremely attractive woman. The reasons why he took Samui were varied. She could have the info he sought. She was a canon character he found gorgeous. She was a female. He wanted her for Ino's practice. He could name many more. But in all honesty, it was a mix of several things, and Ren wouldn't be able to give a straight answer even if he had to tell the truth. It wouldn't change the fact that he did grab her. That said, he really didn't have any nefarious thoughts or plans for Samui in mind when it happened. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and deep down, he was already regretting it because he had no idea what to do with her in the future. He could just kill her, but, yeah, despite everything, he did have a fondness for canon characters. It was a natural part of him as a fan of the Naruto anime. Even living in this world for decades did not destroy that. Just killing her outside of the battle felt somewhat cheap, disheartening? Ren didn't know. He kinda didn't want to do that. He decided that he would leave these problems to the future Ren and focused on the here and now. Pushing his worries away, Ren chuckled in amusement at Hinata's reaction and decided to calm any wild ideas she might have conceived in her head. "Samui has a bingo book entry. She did not exactly introduce herself before trying to kill me." He rolled his eyes at Hinata, whose cheeks became red, but she quickly shook off her embarrassment and shrugged before standing up. "Whatever you say. Your healing is done. I did all I could. I am going to make sure that this Samui is properly disabled and won't get a chance to run away if she wakes up, then." "Hinata." Ren gave her a look. "And I guess I will tell Ino to not overdo it, too." She childishly pouted, making Ren chuckle and reassuringly squeeze her hand before letting go of it. "Good. I think Samui will make for a great practice target for Ino's mental techniques, but she needs to be alive for that." "Oh." Hinata stilled for a second before humming. "That's cold." Was that a pun on her name? Ren tilted his head in surprise, and Hinata beamed at him. "Yes. Was it any good?" She gave him an expectant expression, making him feel a bit guilty as he waved his hand in a so-so motion. I'd give it 6 out of 10. It was more like 3 out of 10, but there was a reason why people say to never piss off a white mage, and Hinata did just finish healing him. "Fair enough," Hinata said, happy with Ren's assessment. "Say, wouldn't keeping this Samui for Ino's practice create trouble with Kumo for us?" "Not really. They most likely think she is dead," Ren explained. "And besides, Kumo will be trying to kill me after this anyway. It is not as if returning her would earn me some brownie points that would ensure we can kiss and make up. Not after he killed Darui, who pretty much held a similar position in Kumo as Kakashi did in Konoha." "Well, sort of. The man was the 4th Raikage's right-hand man, the disciple of the renowned 3rd Raikage, the only user of the Black Lightning in Kumo, and pretty much the ninja with the biggest potential to become the 5th Raikage in the future. Considering his position, I might have even been grooming him for it already. There would be no offer for a make-up hug and forgiveness from Kumo's side. If somebody killed Kuratsuki, Oniki would not let it go. If somebody killed Asuma, Hiruzen would not let it go. If somebody killed Temari, Raza would not give a shit, but that is beside the point. In the same vein, Ren knew that A was not going to let this go. This thing between him and Kumo was not over. Not by a long shot. I guess giving Samui a medical accident would be a mercy then. "Alright, I get it. I'll make sure she survives." With that, Hinata left the room, leaving Ren to stare at the door with a weirded out look. "That girl," he exasperatedly snorted. "Not even a proper ninja, and yet already so vicious. She was usually such a sweetheart. Of all the things that could bring viciousness out of her, it was jealousy? Should he tell Hayashi? Maybe the man would try to get her a new stepmom, creating some juicy drama inside the Hyuga clan? Chapter 94 ch 94. Then act like it. A few days passed, and Ren was finally standing in front of the Hokage after coming back to the village, recounting his encounter with the Kumo ninjas, when Danzo Shimura walked into the Hokage's office as if he owned the place. "I heard Kumo attacked one of our ninjas, Hiruzen," he said steadily, with a flat tone, and Ren found himself involuntarily deadpanning at the man. What did he mean by our ninjas? The audacity of this bitch. Sadly, this was the Hokage's office, and Ren couldn't exactly tell Danzo to leave. That privilege lay strictly with the Hokage, who, yes, it is most concerning, the Hokage evenly said, releasing a puff of smoke from his mouth while ignoring that Danzo invited himself to the briefing. They tried to recruit young Ren here, and it came to blows. Darui is dead. This could possibly spark further hostilities. Yeah, he clearly wasn't going to send the old cripple packing. Sigh. This was exactly why Ren was still so hesitant to trust Hiruzen Sarutobi despite many things indicating that he wasn't some incarnation of all evil of the Narutoverse like so many fanfictions tried to portray him as. The changes the man had made to Konoha were overall quite good. They improved the lives of their citizens a lot. The man obviously deeply cared for his people and gave his all for them. But then there was the fact he still didn't tell Danzo to fuck off at the first opportunity, and Ren had to stifle an annoyed groan. This was going to be one of these kinds of briefings, wasn't it? How did Danzo even get here so fast? Ren literally entered the village and walked straight to the Hokage tower to report what had happened to him. The only way for Danzo to get the information so quickly would be to, oh, the dipshit has spies in the Hokage tower. Ren realized and was astonished at the balls of steel Danzo must have. The Hokage was not stupid. If Ren came to this realization, then Hiruzen probably figured it out the second Danzo opened the door. Yet, the old cripple didn't seem to care that his presence here was basically low-key admitting to his borderline treasonous actions. Unlike in fanfics, there was no root umbu hidden in the Hokage's office. Nothing so blatantly obvious would be allowed, and it honestly wouldn't work anyway. Despite everything, Hiruzen is still an S-rank ninja. He wouldn't miss some Chunin crouching in his office. The sheer idea was moronic as hell. But putting spies in the administration forces of the village that worked under the Hokage? Now, that was much easier to do. Some clerk, or gate guard, or a secretary of some clerk in this building must be reporting to Danzo. He wouldn't have gotten here so fast otherwise. Now that was making Ren depressed. The people working in the Hokage tower were supposed to be vetted with the strictest oversight. But from the way Hiruzen didn't even blink, this was probably not the first time something like this happened. Really? Who needs enemies with a friend like Danzo? And to be fair, what could Hiruzen even do about it? Call him out? Danzo would just deny it and demand proof. Find the culprits? How? If the initial vetting process did not show anything amiss, then any subsequent one was most likely not going to reveal it either. In fact, doing it was far more effort than it was worth, considering the most likely results would be unsatisfactory. No. The only way for Hiruzen to nip this shit in the bud would be to smash Danzo's head with his staff, but the monkey-loving old-timer was not going to do that. Was it any surprise that Ren felt frustrated? He would have dealt with Danzo himself if it were easy. But if he attacked him in the open, then he would have the entire village after his ass. Danzo would spin it in a way to make Ren the bad guy. If he tried to kill him secretly in one decisive strike and failed, which was very likely because of Danzo's Izanagi, he would find himself in a shadow war against Danzo, and the man would most likely target Hinata or Ino, or their families. Ren wanted to avoid that at all costs. It wasn't just his hide that was on the line here anymore. The option to reveal his crimes and have Konoha turn on Danzo was also unavailable. Konoha was still culturally Japanese. Respecting your elders was a big thing, especially if said elders were on the council. Especially if said elders bled for Konoha and had gotten crippled in the service. You also do not poke at somebody's battle wounds. It just wasn't done. It went against every rule of etiquette the ninjas had, which was very convenient for Danzo, who was a war veteran hero who was crippled in the line of duty twice over and served his village faithfully for his entire life and had a high political position in the village and kept many connections with the daimyo's court, the nobles, and the merchants. If Ren, a random Chunin, demanded Danzo to show his crippled arm and eye, he would be laughed out of the council room with his career over. Danzo would not even need to say a word. The other councilmen would send Ren packing for him because they would feel offended that he dared to bring it up. It might not appear so, but Danzo had his cover figured out perfectly. There wasn't much that could be done about him politically. Ren would need Hokage's backing for such an attempt, but he wouldn't get it because just saying a demand like that could severely damage Hiruzen's standing with the clans and civilians alike. And the kicker? Ren couldn't even be sure they could catch Danzo with his pants down with such a request. Unlike in the stories from his past life, Danzo in real life was not a brain-dead idiot. For all Ren knew, the arm might be detachable, and there really might be nothing under that black, baggy kimono Danzo constantly wore to hide his missing limb. As for his Sharingan eye? Yeah, as if people did not change eyes left and right in the Narutoverse. Danzo probably never brought it into the council chambers or anywhere near a public place. After all, if the multitude of Hyugas never discovered it over the years, then Danzo probably did not have these upgrades constantly on his person. Somebody would have noticed long ago. Evading Byakugan was nigh impossible, and the Byakugan users usually saw even things they did not want to see just because they entered their field of vision. If there was something fishy to be found about Danzo's crippled status, then it would have been discovered long ago. Not to mention, Ren actually needed Danzo to live, at least until the Konoha crush happened. His most immediate goal was to end Orochimaru and Kabuto in one fell swoop, and that event would be the best opportunity he would ever get. No Edo Tensei meant no Madara coming back to life as an unkillable zombie with nigh infinite chakra reserves and Rinnegan, who could spam Shadow Clone plus perfect Susanoo or throw meteorites left and right like nobody's business. Frankly, Ren would prefer Madara coming back to an actual real life than having his Edo Tensei version running around. At least, that way, he could run out of chakra and would be constrained to human limits. There would be no Shadow Clones, plus a perfect Susanoo combo for him in that state. There would be no meteorite spam. Injuries would not instantly regenerate. Killing blows would stick, too. No. Human Madara was way more manageable and, most importantly, killable. Edo Tensei Madara was the nightmare mode Ren would love to avoid. Ren was afraid that prematurely killing Danzo would make it harder for Orochimaru to organize the invasion, and if he aborted the plan, that would have been disastrous. When would Ren get such a golden opportunity to assassinate him again? Ren knew it was coming. He could prepare. He could plan. He could litter the battlefield with hidden seals before the fighting even started. He had the home field advantage. And he wasn't going to give it up just because Danzo was being annoying. Unfortunately, Orochimaru was simply the bigger fish to fry in this situation, and as deeply as Ren desired to wring Danzo's neck, the momentary satisfaction just wasn't worth the chance at killing the Snake Sun and Kabuto. Edo Tensei could not be allowed to be utilized in the upcoming war. Even as a Sealmaster who would have a massive advantage against the Edo Tensei zombies, Ren still didn't want to face it. He would rather no-sell that entire plot direction before it could become an issue. Unaware of Ren's inner turmoil, Danzo frowned when he heard Hiruzen's words. "Recruit?" he asked, giving Ren a long measuring look. His expression didn't betray anything, but he wasn't happy about it. He paid them with a proxy for an S-rank assassination mission, and they tried to recruit the target? Danzo inwardly scoffed. This was why clients never chose Kumo as their preferred choice of hidden village to employ. They were honorless, shameless swines who could not do what they were paid for. Utterly disgraceful. But it was fine. He would have preferred if Ren died, but there was success even in failure. He would get the report of Ren's fight with the Kumo ninjas, and it would reveal more of Ren's abilities. Plus, Ren was now fully on Kumo's radar, with a grudge the size of the Hokage monument forming between him and the Kumo leadership. The fourth Raikage was not a patient or forgiving man. That alone meant that Danzo got his money's worth. But maybe he could put in some effort to curb Ren's threat, too. And what, pray tell, were you doing over there, Chunin Ren? Meeting with Darui of the Black Lightning, the Raikage's most trusted ninja, Danzo coldly asked, trying to bring suspicion on Ren, who frowned after hearing his words. I was on a mission. Duh. Ren flatly said, but Danzo was not satisfied. He turned toward the Hokage. Hiruzen, my confidential sources state that Ren stole information from the village and intended to sell sources you will no doubt not disclose. Ren interrupted him with a scoff, followed by an eye roll, yet you expect me to defend myself against their imaginary claims. Really? Was he really trying to use the ninja version of trust me, brother on him? Well, Ren had to admit that it wasn't a bad plan. Mission scrolls usually tend to get destroyed in similar situations. Not to mention, Darui possessed the mission scroll Ren would have needed to prove his innocence. The records of said mission in the village were no doubt already turned into ash. Probably the second after Ren left the village. Ninja's gonna ninja. It wasn't that unexpected for Danzo to believe Ren didn't possess it, because why would Darui give it to him if he was there to kill him in the first place, right? And without said mission scroll, Danzo's claims would have at least some sort of effect, even if the Hokage shut them down. Sadly for the cripple. Then it is a good thing that Ren managed to bring back the mission scroll that proves he was indeed there on a sanctioned mission from Konoha. It seems we have a serious security breach on our hands, Hiruzen gravely stated, completely ignoring Ren's previous rude interruption aimed at Danzo. Danzo's lips only twitched minusculely upon hearing that Ren brought back the scroll, and he lightly nodded. I see. I must have been mistaken, then. He offhandedly admitted as if accusing Ren of treason was some sort of harmless prank. Ren's fingers twitched, and he had to fight a quick but brutal inward battle to prevent himself from throwing a kunao at the old dipshit. But Danzo didn't even give him enough time to throw a rude remark at him in return. Still, his presence there is suspicious. For all we knew, he might have been in league with the spies. He should be properly screened to ensure his loyalties. I heard he is a good friend and tutor of the Yamanaka heiress. Maybe the Yamanaka clan could be a good neutral party for this endeavor. Ah, yes. That, at least, sounded like a reasonable suggestion. Offering a neutral third party was also smart, and it seemed that Danzo was trying to distance himself from the matter. But Ren was aware the man had that Yamanaka lackey whose name he had already forgotten. Fuck you. Not gonna happen, you dipshit. He exclaimed with a snort, shocking Danzo with his crass words as Hiruzen chuckled but stayed silently observing the situation while enjoying the cinema. The only person I'd let touch my mind is Ino. Ren said, not outright refusing the possibility of screening because that would have been suspicious in itself, but he also showed he wouldn't just accept some random Yamanaka rummage through his mind. As reasonable as that suggestion sounded, it was way over the top. It was rude and insulting. So, Ren responded in a similarly childish manner. Ino was not yet a kunoichi of Konoha, but she was Yamanaka. And she, well, Ren didn't have any delusions. Danzo definitely knew that Ren was poking her with his secret kunao on the regular basis. Ino wasn't one to keep such a thing secret, and unlike Hinata, she liked her public showcase of affection. But Ren's partial acceptance was still a reasonable compromise, and Danzo didn't like that. His eyebrows scrunched slightly in frustration, and his voice grew harsher. As an elder of Konoha, I order you to dash, but Ren just scoffed, not letting him finish. As an elder, you have a position in the village's political scene, not in its military command structure, so why the fuck are you trying to order me around, you see now retard? Do you not know where your competencies start and where they end? No wonder the second Hokage didn't choose you as his successor if you don't know something elementary like that. Ren mockingly said, causing Danzo to finally break his poker face and sneer while Hiruzen's lips quivered and his eyes mirthfully glinted. Watch your mouth. I am an elder of this village. Show some respect, Chunin. But Ren just cheekily grinned, then act like it, you old crippled washed up has-been. Chapter 95, ch 95, promotion? Then act like it, you old crippled washed up has-been. How dare you? I've been working hard for the well-being of Konoha way before you were even born. Danzo exclaimed, offended by Ren's words. For somebody so vehemently advocating that ninjas need to stay emotionless, Danzo was a very emotional man under his veneer of cold facade. Ha! Interesting point. Ren curiously tilted his head. I have yet to see you do anything impressive or helpful for Konoha, but I am young and might be ignorant. Care to share what amazing things you have accomplished in your life? That made Danzo speechless. He couldn't exactly share his exploits because most of them were pretty much highly illegal. And just as he was about to say that he had sacrificed his eye and arm for Konoha as its ninja, Ren mockingly spoke before he could open his mouth. No? Thought so. Danzo gnashed his teeth. The things I do need to stay secret for the greater good of the village. You don't possess a high enough rank to know about them, Chunin. With a snort, Ren raised his eyebrow at him. Figures. And does the Hokage possess such a rank? And once again, Danzo was caught flat-footed, staying silent in dismay for a moment because he really had nothing to say to that. Ren didn't let him think and took his silence as a denial when he gave Danzo an unimpressed look and said, and you want to accuse me of treason? Really? Pot calling kettle black much? Don't put words in my mouth. Without me, Konoha would have fallen long ago. Danzo rebuked, and Ren noticed how Hiruzen's lips twitched, and the man lost quite a bit of his amusement. That was a very egotistical thing to say. Konoha has been throwing its ninjas into the meat grinder in pretty much every single war. To say that Danzo was responsible for the village's survival sounded as if he was disregarding their sacrifice. Ren wasn't sure if Danzo realized that in the heat of the moment, but instead of going at him through that angle, he just couldn't help himself and had to poke at the arrogant thing Danzo had just said. Oh, I am sure Oniki in IWA is shaking in his boots upon hearing your title Shinobi of Darkness. The yellow flash hoot. Rolling his eyes, Ren scoffed. No, some cowardly old wannabe whose bingo book title is so edgy that you could kill S-rank ninjas with that edge is obviously what keeps the demons at bay. He then crossed his arms on his chest and smiled at Danzo, who was coldly looking at him. Seeing that the old man was about to reply, Ren hurried to speak again. Did you choose the title when you were still a delusional preteen? And how much did it cost you to get the bingo book printers to put it under your name? Unfortunately, Danzo didn't react as much to that last series of insults as Ren hoped. Instead, Danzo regained his calm and fired back. Better than Ren the Stoner, he mockingly said. And for a moment, Ren opened his mouth to quip something back, but then his mind registered what Danzo insinuated. What did you just say? Ren asked, feeling as if somebody punched him so hard he lost his breath. It stopped Ren's mind completely in its tracks, showing Danzo's vast experience when it came to shit-talking. Danzo, I think it would be wiser for you to leave. Hiruzen, seeing that Ren was completely caught off guard, decided to intervene before Danzo could press with some other brutal verbal attack. He knew best how this kind of revelation felt. After all, he was known far and wide as the shitflinger. Sometimes, he really regretted using the horde of monkey summons against IWA troops in the Second War. You are not going to attain any sort of victory here, old friend. Hiruzen continued, knowing that Danzo hated being called an old friend by him. Truth be told, he was doing it on purpose these days. It was one of his guilty pleasures in his old age. Hearing Hiruzen's words, Danzo gripped his cane tighter and turned toward him. Hiruzen, why are you not reprimanding your ninja for the blatant disrespect he shows me? You should keep your subordinates in line, he sternly uttered, only for Hiruzen to give him a curious look. So, should I reprimand you for the blatant disrespect you have shown me? For the third time that hour, Danzo had nothing to say back, and Hiruzen enjoyed every millisecond of his speechlessness. His old friend loved to yap about drastic measures this or that, all the time, again and again. Moments when he was genuinely speechless were a precious commodity. If he could, Hiruzen would make a Danzo Silence Day into a village-wide celebration. That's how annoyed he was at times. My actions saved this village countless times during the wars. You know it. Danzo seethingly defended himself, but Hiruzen just casually shrugged one shoulder and waved his remark off. It was more of a team effort. Ren, who used the time when Danzo and Hiruzen bantered to recover from the emotional damage he had sustained, chuckled. And that, right there, is the reason why he is the Hokage, he said, simply because he knew it would piss Danzo off. But he was half serious. Hiruzen was simply better at taking credit for the achievements of others. Like, he was still regarded as the strongest Hokage by the younger generations because that's what they learn in the academy. A bit sus, no? Hiruzen locked his eyes with Danzo, a playful smile on his lips as he enjoyed how his old friend straightened up. If anything, he had his body language down pat by now, and despite his still stone-cold facade, Hiruzen could say that Danzo was pissed. Naturally, he decided to add some oil to that burn as he leisurely puffed on his pipe with a lazy smile. I am Hokage, indeed. For a few seconds, Danzo just stood there, looking lost as his eyes traveled between Hiruzen and Ren, thinking about what to say back. But then he realized he would be having no victories here. Not now. I see. Excuse me, then. I have work to do. He decided to cut his losses and retreat as he reaffirmed his decision to get rid of Ren. The young Chunin was giving Hiruzen back his courage. That wouldn't do. Now, if only his forces were still not in shambles. Danzo finally left the Hokage office, shutting the door behind him with a loud bang, and Ren shared a conspiring smile with Hiruzen for a moment. This might not be a Chinese cultivation world, but face and honor were still important in the Japanese-like culture prevalent over here. So, naturally, the art of thick skin was supreme in this world. That was fun. Hiruzen let out a relaxed sigh, an amused smirk decorating his well-aged face as he lightly shook his head. Still, it might not have been the wisest course of action. Ren, you made a dangerous enemy on this day. He cautioned Ren, who huffed but nodded in understanding. But he had way more important issues to deal with. More importantly, Ren the Stoner. He gave the Hokage a meaningful look, but Hiruzen only chortled and handed Ren the newest bingo book from his table, already opened on the page with Ren's entry. Here. It's what Kumo calls you. He said with a knowing smirk as Ren stared at the page in horror when he said that they really called him Ren the Stoner. I am going to raze that goddamned cloud-worshipping village to the ground. Here, he thought Ren the salty ninja was bad, and Ino enjoyed her punishment in the bedroom for spreading that title very much, but there would be no hanky-panky punishment for this travesty. No, Ren decided this needed drastic measures. For a brief moment, he considered learning 1,000 years of death from Kakashi, but that was a cognito-hazard trap. He shuddered as he almost got caught in it. He wouldn't be sticking his fingers into some other dude's ass. No way. Oh, don't look so put off. Hiruzen tried to cheer him up. Oniki will be jealous. Of course, he had to smugly remind Ren that Kumo was not the only issue for him anymore. IWA will want to kill me. Ren's eyes widened as he had that realization. Hiruzen nodded. That was probably the point in giving you that title. He chuckled. But it kind of fits, doesn't it? Ren took a deep breath, ignoring the annoying old man. Maybe letting Kagaya have this world would not be so bad, after all? It was preferable to Ino learning about his new title, and naturally, I have already informed Miss Yamanaka and Miss Hayaga about the change of your status. You don't need to thank me. Hiruzen, able to read what Ren was probably thinking from his expression, informed Ren about his helpful actions with a barely hidden glee. Ren visibly winced. Ino was going to be insufferable for the coming week. At least Hinata would only giggle here and there behind his back. The shitflinger. Seeing that Hiruzen was a bit too happy, Ren reminded him about his own unofficial title with a twitching eye. He should not throw stones from his fragile glass house. But Hiruzen didn't even flinch and took it calmly like a champ. He was too old to be provoked by some young brat, after all. Instead, he decided to progress the discussion. He was a busy man, and the paperwork, unfortunately, waited for no man. Anyway, I think you deserve a promotio-I refuse, Ren exclaimed before Hiruzen could finish his sentence. Excuse me, Hiruzen frowned with a slow, owlish blink. No promotion. Ren crossed his arms in front of his chest to emphasize his point. I am happy where I am, thank you very much. I don't need additional responsibilities. Plus, he really didn't want to get dragged into Hiruzen's sphere of influence. With his latest exploit, Ren firmly entered the up-and-coming talented ninja category, and he was a civilian-born ninja with no set-in-stone allegiances. He could already see all the various political factions in the village drooling while looking at him, wishing to take a bite. No, he really didn't need a jonin promotion to muddy the waters more. There were benefits to being mostly unaffiliated. As for the promotion itself, some people might say that with the jonin rank, he would have gotten more privileges, but jonins were rare. They were always busy. Always on some mission for the village. Ren quite liked his free time, however. The eternal genin dude knew what he was doing, and Ren decided to follow his example. Konoha needed its eternal chunin. Well, it had several thousands of them, but that was beside the point. Are you sure? Hiruzen asked with a dissatisfied voice. That wasn't the answer he wanted to hear, but Ren's expression was not budging. Very. Ren firmly nodded. You could be a jonin instructor of Ino and Hinata if you took the promotion, you know. Hiruzen blatantly tried to bribe Ren. They are going to graduate soon if I am not wrong. Nah, they need interactions and bonding with their peers. Ren shook his head, trying to bullshit his way out of this. Besides, he didn't want to get stuck with Naruto under his care. If he learned anything in this meeting, it was that Hiruzen was enough of a troll to do exactly that to him. Say what you will about the blonde menace, and Ren honestly liked the kid, but one thing was certain. He attracted trouble like some sort of weird yellow magnet. To save the world from Kagaya, Ren would first have to survive until that point. And Naruto was a health hazard he would wish only on a bastard like Kakashi. They deserved each other. Such a will of fire. Hiruzen dryly deadpanned before sighing. Well, fine. I can't exactly promote you against your will. He sullenly grumbled. Now, get out. I have work to do. Don't let YouTube hide your otaku corner. Be part of Infinite Novel. Hit subscribe.